It is absolutely disgusting. The rhetoric that led us to this moment, calling President Trump a fascist, calling him Hitler, you had news organizations and mainstream media celebrating that, allowing those things to take place and be said on their networks. Right. That is dangerous.
Is Trump a fascist? Trump's a fascist. Wait, no, is Trump a fascist? No, the media is to blame for irresponsibly calling him a fascist, even though he might be a fascist. I'm media founding editor Colby Hall, and this is the topic of debate these days. How do we properly label a sitting U.S. president that's doing things that we've never quite seen before, and how the media, many of which are partisan, are portraying him? All of this is in conversation, of course, because ABC recently suspended indefinitely late-night host Jimmy Kimmel for saying this.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Now, immediately, there was outrage on the left. There was sort of bending over backwards by some notable sources that were trying to say what he said was accurate.
He's essentially saying that, MAGA supporters were trying to prove that the killer was not one of their own and that they were trying to score political points. It can be, maybe it's offensive, maybe you disagree with it, but it's not.
It's not wrong.
It's clear to me that he was basically painting the assailant or alleged assailant as part of the MAGA crowd. It wasn't a joke. Yes, he's a comedian and there's room for satire. What I think he was doing was he was sort of preemptively politicizing this tragic event by blaming the MAGA side for politicizing it. It was irresponsible, and I think it showed sort of a deep misunderstanding of just how tragic and sad an event this was for well over 50% of the country. Even if you weren't a huge Charlie Kirk supporter, a lot of people found this a terrible tragedy, one you don't sort of make light of. I think it revealed that Jimmy Kimmel was, or is, in a bubble of like-minded people that failed to understand just what a big deal this was for so many people. Of course, I don't think he should have been suspended. He misspoke, and people misspeak all the time and don't get suspended, but clearly the executives at ABC's corporate owner, Disney, well, they clearly want to try to pivot to a less anti-Trump point of view. Why is that? A bunch of reasons. Only they can answer why. Maybe they want to get in good with the Trump administration because they have the power of regulation. In fact, the FCC chair, Brendan Carr, made it very, very clear during an interview with Benny Johnson exactly what he felt should happen.
Frankly, when you see stuff like this, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or, there's going to be additional work for the FCC.
So that's a clear statement, right? That's as clear as anything, that they wanted ABC to take care of their man. And almost like sort of a mob boss threat sort of way. It would be a real terrible thing if something happened to your late night host, huh? And of course, he was suspended and there was predictable outrage. A lot of it is deserved. It's not an attack on the First Amendment because the First Amendment protects the people from government actions. But clearly, this seems as though the FCC and the White House crossed an accepted line of behavior by putting a real clear pressure campaign on Disney to get rid of one of Trump's biggest critics, right? And Trump has made very, very clear over and over again that he'd like to see Kimmel go the way of another late night critic of his, Stephen Colbert, and others. You could also argue, as Mark Halperin has made the point, ABC has given at least 2 hours every day to sort of virulent anti-Trump programming. That is in the form of Jimmy Kimmel, but also The View.
Well, it's incredible that the Walt Disney Company, which for many, many years has allowed The View and Jimmy Kimmel to take up 2 hours of real estate to appeal to the big stations in New York and Los Angeles and Chicago, where the audiences are more liberal. And now at least one station group, and I believe it's at least two, where their stations are in more rural areas and not in the big coastal cities, have said, no. A comment like that in the current environment, less than a week after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, is not acceptable. And the fact that ABC did that under some pressure from the FCC, but more under pressure from station owners, is a watershed Again, in a history of a company that pumped out The View, anti-Trump for a decade, Jimmy Kimmel, anti-Trump for a decade. No equal time for MAGA, no equal time for conservative voices. This was a bridge too far under the circumstances, and it's of a piece with what we're seeing, which is some government coercion, but also just the market is speaking. Conservatives watch TV too, and they found that unacceptable.
And maybe the executives at ABC realized that the pendulum needs to shift the other way, and they wanted to pivot their program to be less partisan, less political. That makes sense. However, to do it in this setting kind of undermines that logic. Nonetheless, this firing has led to a raft of criticism that the Trump administration is vilifying the media and putting on a pressure campaign that led to this and many other actions, right?
It is absolutely disgusting. The rhetoric that led us to this moment, calling President Trump a fascist, calling him Hitler, you had news organizations and mainstream media celebrating that, allowing those things to take place and be said on their networks. Right. That is dangerous.
What I find to be most interesting is this idea that somehow it's this label of fascism is deeply irresponsible and is leading to political violence and is also false.
You know, if you designate the other side as Hitlerian or fascist, why would you negotiate with them? We said that many times. This rhetoric has been part of the Democratic media industry complex for the past decade.
So you see this argument a lot on especially conservative television, that the media, left-leaning media, is irresponsibly using references to dictators and authoritarians and fascists and Hitler to irresponsibly vilify Trump. And I think sometimes that there is a point to that. But recently, Eric Schmidt, who's a MAGA influencer, posted something on social media that said that 80% of Democrats see Trump as fascist, 47% see the rise of fascism as their top political concern. And more than half of left-leaning Americans even told a pollster that they think political violence against Trump could be justified as a result. This was shared virally and was even promoted by X.com owner and most followed user Elon Musk, who said, quote, extremely troubling. The implication there is clear. The idea is that it's not that Trump is acting fascist that's the issue. What's the really issue is the media is unfairly portraying him. And it doesn't take long to find examples of that.
You can't call someone who you disagree with or simply can't win an argument with a Nazi, a fascist, a dictator, a greatest threat to democracy in the history of civilization, and then pretend you had nothing to do with it when the more radical wing, and there does not seem to be all that much difference to me these days, takes up arms and tries to kill those they disagree with. It's not one way. It's not both ways.
I gotta say, nonsense. The polling is not evidence of media bias. It's evidence that Americans are reading and listening and paying close attention to what Trump is doing. Okay, so let's level set here with our definition. Fascism is not a synonym for Hitler, nor is it shorthand for mass atrocities. The use of the word has been irresponsibly conflated by MSNBC and Fox News, and probably says more about U.S. declining education standards than anything else. So what is fascism? It's a political tradition rooted in authoritarianism. It's built on a cult of personality. It's obsessed with silencing dissent. And yes, Hitler and Mussolini are probably the most famous fascists, but so too are Marcos and Franco, right? There's a wide spectrum of fascism, and just because you say someone is acting authoritarian or fascist doesn't mean you are Hitler. Although that's clearly how it's being used on both sides to score partisan points. Like I said, I think Trump and his supporters have some legitimate beef with left-leaning media irresponsibly using this term. And going back to 2017, they cried wolf about the fascist threat from the very beginning. And yet, when we arrive at a place where there's a real fascist wolf acting in a real sort of terrible, sort of authoritarian Project 2025 manner, those cries of warning sort of ring hollow. There is a point to the fact that left-leaning media have overplayed their hand significantly. So let's just list the reasons why Trump is accurately being labeled as fascist. First of all, he said that immigrants were, quote, poisoning the blood of our country.
They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done. They poison.
He undermined American elections, even going so far as telling Georgia election officials to find him 11,000 votes.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes which is one more that we have.
He praised January 6 rioters who violently attacked the Capitol under the auspice of stopping the steal of a free and fair election that he lost. And he called them patriots and ultimately pardoned them. Of course, he's called journalists, quote, the enemy of the people and the fake news. That's just like the German term Lügenpresse, which was basically the lying press. These aren't rumors and asides just whispered into CNN cameras. These are actual facts that prove the authoritarian, or yes, even fascist claim. So when people conclude that this behavior resembles fascism, that's not brainwashing and that's not media narrative, it's logic. And this keeps getting misplayed. For example, on Fox News Gutfeld Wednesday night, Tyrus complained that Randy Weingarten, former head of the teachers union, didn't understand the definition of fascism.
She's supposed to be a head of education.
Yeah.
She held a job where she was in charge of schools.
Yeah.
And doesn't know what the word fascist means.
Yeah.
If you look at the definition of fascist, it's your projection.
Yeah.
Anarchy, overwhelming government, suppressing the other side, controlling the media.
I'm sorry, Tyrus, but if you're going to correct someone's definition of fascism, you should get it right. Like, he's a former pro wrestler who I don't expect to be an expert on this, but if you're on TV and you're going to correct the record, get it right. Yet there's other examples of gaslighting. Take Sean Hannity and Joe Concha on Fox News Wednesday night, who said this about the conservative reaction to Jimmy Kimmel.
Can you name one prominent conservative that said, I want Jimmy Kimmel fired? Because I can't.
Can't find it, don't see it online, and quite frankly, that's because it does not exist, Sean.
Really? Not one prominent conservative voice called for Kimmel to be fired? Huh. Well, what about Trump saying in 2024 that he's got to go, ABC's got to get rid of him? Or, of course, Brendan Carr, the FCC chair, strongly suggesting that he should be suspended.
I mean, obviously, look, there's calls for Kimmel to be fired. I think, you could certainly see a path forward for suspension over this. And again, the FCC is going to have remedies that we could look at. And again, we may ultimately be called to be a judge on that.
So in this light, Kimmel's suspension works sort of less as a programming call and more of how a pressure campaign works, right? A star mocks Trump. Trump rails at ABC about it. The network gets nervous, and eventually the comic disappears from the air. No laws need to change, no jackboots required, just enough intimidation to make institutions lurch. And the chill is the point. It allows the defenders to say, see, the media is the real fascist here, which silence dissent and poisons minds. Meanwhile, Trump accumulates more evidence of the very thing that they say is a mirage. The press should never be above criticism. And in fact, there's lots of irresponsible stuff that gets said on left-leaning media all the time. But pretending that Americans only believe that Trump is behaving like authoritarian because of a New York Times article or something that's said on CNN and MSNBC, well, it erases the long public record and asks us to doubt what we're seeing with our own eyes. It seems long odds that Disney is going to put Kimmel back on air. It's hard to imagine that he's going to have his show again. And what it shows is that corporations are learning that it's much more cost-effective to bend a knee to Trump than resisting him. And honestly, maybe it's time for entertainment programs to stop being so resistant. I don't watch Jimmy Kimmel or The View because it's like listening to classic rock and hearing Hotel California for the 10,000th time. It doesn't appeal to me. It only makes me angry. And yet Trump's defenders are learning that if they blame the media long enough, they can make fascism sound like a branding problem and not a government one. Again, I'm Mediaite founding editor Colby Hall. If you want more videos like this, please click the like and subscribe button. Thank you for watching.